Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Murkison. I'm one of the co-founders of Intelligent Buildings, and it's a pleasure of mine to be helping to moderate, as I was telling these folks a few minutes ago, the Brainiac panel that we got here. And we're going to be talking about what is a smart building and get some perspectives from some big organizations, both on the I would say the supply side with Kilroy and the occupier side with Microsoft and Warner Media. Before we jump into things, I just want to take a few seconds to thank our track sponsor, LinkSpring, for helping make this possible. These are important conversations. It's a little bit different than it has been in the past with Realcomm IBcon, but this year should be no different as far as the ability to share information and share good knowledge. With that, I would like to go ahead and get our panel just to introduce themselves, if you guys don't mind, and just take 5 minutes or so to give a little bit of perspective on your view of what is a smart building. And then after we do that, we're going to jump right into some questions and answers. And hopefully we'll get some good, I know we'll get some good questions. I know these guys will have some great answers for us. So with that, Steve, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hello, Rob. Thanks for the invite. Hello, everybody. I'm Steve Lefkowitz. I'm the global head of real estate for Warner Media. Those who are not aware, that's formerly Time Warner. We're now an AT&T company, and we're considered a global leader in entertainment. Our brands include WB, Warner Brothers, HBO, Turner, and much more. I've been in their real estate organization now for 38 years. I started with HBO. I could say I've seen quite a bit of change, both culturally, physically, and technically over the years. Our teams are basically responsible for the delivery of real estate services across about 15 million square feet of diversified property to support our businesses. We have a regional functional operating model that allows for the delivery of property management and design and construction across the globe. We also work very closely with AT&T, our parent company, to develop real estate strategy, transactions, and lease administration. So I'd say I'm more on the corporate side of the business compared to my colleagues on the phone here. So all this work is driven by what I call a COE, a center of expertise, that really promotes a culture of continuous improvement within our world. So I guess the question is, why am I here? I assume it's because my team and I were fortunate enough to be given an opportunity to develop a smart building solution at scale, and that's really the word which was ultimately acknowledged last year with the 2019 Global Innovation Award that we were very proud of. Our journey actually began back in 2008 with a directive to reduce our real estate portfolio in New York City. We had over 2.5 million square feet of property that was expiring at the end of 2018. And that strategic decision led to the consolidation of 7 buildings down to 1, which reduced our overall footprint by approximately 1 million square feet. So after we went through some extensive discovery and programming process, we settled on partnering with Related Properties at Hudson Yards. Those of you not familiar, it's a huge emerging market in Midtown Manhattan. The neighborhood is constructed over rail yards. There's 16 towers, including commercial, residential, and retail space. And in terms of scale, that project was and still is the largest private real estate development in the history of the United States, believe it or not. We ended up landing at 30 Hudson Yards, which is a 1,290-foot, 90-story skyscraper. We occupy more than half of that tower, or about 1.4 million square feet. And we were fortunate to be able to design it as a building within a building for us to be able to control our core critical systems. We basically carved it out from the rest of the tower. Our mission critical businesses are dependent upon our ability to provide and operate, at the 5 nines of reliability, which required our building infrastructure to be state of the art and driven by smart technology. Our smart building system integrates over 200,000 data points and sensors across a multitude of systems and brings it back to a central brain to help develop actionable results, things that we can actually do something with. A couple of points to emphasize. I do want to emphasize the importance of partnering with our information technology teams early in the process. That was of paramount importance to our success. utilization of their enterprise-wide networks, four-corner Wi-Fi, cybersecurity protocol, which can't be forgotten, are all vital components of our overall smart building program. If you look at with the booming market of smart building technology providers, the challenge for us was clearly to understand the key elements and decision points that were needed to be able to implement the program. So how did we get there? We kind of started with an event, Cortec, Realcomm, years ago, probably 2008, I think it was, with some of our subject matter experts a few years back. And then once we finished that exercise, pretty much smart building technology became a part of our daily vocabulary. It just became our day in and day out. And that event really enabled us to identify and assemble the teams of experts that we needed to really fulfill this vision. The hardest part in my case, and because it was quite some time ago, was crafting a compelling business case that was wrapped around energy savings, operating efficiencies, environmental responsibility, employee health, just to help justify the funding needed for our smart building. It was more about that at the time than it is today, where it's morphed into more of an employee experience around the globe. But my personal opinion is, quite frankly, it would be irresponsible today to construct and I've said this before, to construct a new building that isn't evaluated through a smart building lens. In the end, the goal is somewhat to rely on building intelligence to tell us what the building needs when it needs it. And I'll close just by saying again, and I've heard quite a few people say this, including Jim years ago. Keep in mind, this is a journey. It is not a destination. I don't think you ever really get there. You're going to continue to experience new performers, new players in the market, and you're going to need a mechanism to be able to evaluate these tools to make sure that they meet what's necessary for your overall program. So that's kind of my level of involvement in smart building technology. Lots to talk about there. And Rob, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you for that color, Steve. It's that your project at scale has been an inspiration for a lot of folks in this industry. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Manuel, why don't you go next and give us a little bit of color? Everyone knows who Microsoft is, but tell us a little bit more about your role and your perspective on smart buildings.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. Hey, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Daniel. I'm a director in the industry innovation team focusing on smart buildings and campuses. What do? I work with our real estate and security colleagues at Microsoft and help define the digital transformation strategy for Microsoft's campuses globally. When we started with smart buildings, the whole question was, what do we want to do? What is our definition of a smart building? So we went down and we said, for us, a smart building has to be connected, accessible, sustainable, and secure. And with that, we went around and we said, okay, what does that mean for us? What are we trying to achieve? And at the three pinnacles of it was use the campus and space that we have as an avenue to be able to attract and retain people. People should love to come and work on Microsoft campus in a Microsoft space, be more engaged, be more empowered. Two, it was all about driving engagement, because ultimately what we do is not just for ourselves, but as a way to be able to replicate it across our ecosystem, across our portfolio. Anybody who wants to have a smart connected building in terms of the services that we are offering should be able to do what we have. So that's how we started down our journey of smart buildings. And the difference for us was, we said, hey, we're having an East Campus coming up. East Campus is 17 new buildings, around 72 acres and 2.5 million square feet of workspace that's been brought up across 17 buildings. And we said, why would people want to come and work on the campus? What does a smart building mean from the perspective of a user or a tenant or an occupier that works in that space? Now, we all knew smart buildings was all about sustainability, efficiency, and connectivity. In terms of how we were making our buildings optimized and sustainable, we were leaders in that space. But what we wanted to evolve on is, what does that mean for the occupant of that space? How do we empower that occupant to be able to be more productive, more engaged, and more work in a situation or an environment that they are most comfortable in? So the bottom line was empowering people to be more productive version of themselves. And that's where we started looking at experience of that space. So how do we use technology and and drive engagement of the physical environment with technology to create a unique experience for every occupant or every person that comes into contact with that building. That for us was truly smart, where the services in that building are accessible to anyone that comes into contact with it, and the building enables them to find an avenue or a space to work the way they want to work. Now, in simplest terms, when you look at it, it's all about collaboration and productivity. So what does that mean? The space is going to allow you to work in a way that you like, allow you to meet people, and the space would dynamically adapt to the different forms of collaboration you would need to be able to achieve the goals of your business. And that was the journey that we started, and we are progressing on that journey to ensure anyone that comes into contact is more productive and is more empowered. Rob?
Muted. Sorry. Thanks for that perspective. Before we jump on to Byron, I just want to emphasize what I heard you say and I heard Steve say is that experience has become more and more important in the over time as we've gone down this journey. And I'll be looking forward to hearing more about that in the conversation. I also want to encourage those of you that are listening to this or watching this conversation to please ask questions. We got, like I said, we got some brainiacs on here that have a heck of a lot of experience, and this is a unique situation to ask questions of these folks. So with that, Byron, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Byron Lopez. I'm the operational technology manager for Kilroy Realty. And Kilroy operates about 14 million square feet across 100 assets on the West Coast. We also have anywhere between 2 and 5 million square feet under development. So it's a fairly large portfolio for us, primarily on the West Coast. My responsibilities is to take a look at our buildings to figure out our networking, cybersecurity, and smart building strategy. What is a smart building? What do we have for our tenants? We operate them, we develop them, but we have to make sure that our tenants are happy coming into the environment. Like Emmanuel was saying, happy tenants keep your buildings occupied. So whatever you can do to help those people come in and work and be there, it's going to give you an advantage. We initially started the project just primarily looking at BASs. You know, we're great in sustainability. We have great services there, but our BASs had some issues. And we said, let's do something about that. Let's put a network, let's put an infrastructure. And that just opened a whole kind of worms, right? Because people think that, you know, building automations, yeah, you have a smart building, but no, there's lighting controls, there's water detection, there's, you know, smart sensors, there's got a Wi-Fi experience, access controls, there's a whole plethora of things out there. So what we had to do is we had to look at our portfolio and say, where do we standardize? Where can we have common threads across all of our portfolio? Because each building is different, right? You're gonna have a vendor that's doing this, a vendor that's doing that, elevators, everybody's doing their own thing. You have to be able to have a platform and a standard. And that's kind of where we took our smart building solution forward from, setting the foundation, setting the infrastructure, and then layering in the bells and whistles, as I like to say, right? Bringing in the smart cameras, bringing in the touchless access, bringing in all those pieces that make an experience worth for you, but still having the foundation of a building that's efficient, that is, you know, cost effective, and then putting those pieces towards our new development. You know, we have a lot of new development happening around our portfolio, so taking the policies and procedures that we learned from our initial audits and pushing those forwards towards our new development. So now when a new building gets brought up, we start with a smart building idea from the beginning, right? Instead of saying, just put the cables, we'll figure out later. No, let's put the cables so we know what we're putting in later. Or let's put those rough-ins now so that we know we want to bring in sensors, or we want to bring in touchless, or we want to bring that. But the system's already there and efficient, that you're already there looking forward, right? We all see that experience in the movies where you get to your house, you say lights on, but that's where we're going towards as an industry. But we have to put the foundation, since that for us was a smart building. How do we make our assets more appealing to the tenants and also for our employees, where we have to work there and easy for our engineers and facility managers to work in? They're the ones maintaining these sites. One of the things that I always like to remember is that, you know, in the past, people would have to go into buildings and, you know, turn on the furnaces and keep the heating on, but now our building engineers do it from their phones. So that's kind of where the efficiencies are happening, not just for the tenants, but also our employees who are operating these sites.
Well, thanks for that perspective. And you mentioned about some different technologies. You also talked about the foundation. And we got a question just to get this kicked off from the audience, sort of provocative, if you will. And it's the idea that is real estate going to be one of the next, I mean, I think those of you are familiar with prop tech that's merging between property and technology. The question is, could real estate become productivity as a service? And I just want to hear y'all's perspective on that, and that's going to lead to another question of the different types of spaces that you guys manage. But we'll start with you, Byron, and we'll work backwards to Emmanuel and then back to Steve. I'm just thinking physically, like we're sitting on a stage here. We got a panel, but we don't physically have that. So I'm trying to keep some logical order. But yeah, go ahead, give us your perspective on that.
No, I think so. I mean, and experiences within a building make you more productive, right? Imagine if you go into a smart campus where you have a dry cleaner, where you have kids daycare. At home, you might not have those productivity services, right? You go into work, you drop off your cleaning, you drop off your services, you get your car powered, you get your car washed, you leave. A lot of those things that you were doing normally outside of business hours are now done at work. So those are the experiences that you're thinking of, right? Right now, you're staying at home. You have to go to the car wash. You have to go and do all those pieces. But real estate, the smarter you make it, the more services you provide for somebody, you want to do that. I mean, I know a lot of companies who provide gyms in the building because they don't want you to leave. They want you to go downstairs, go work up, come back upstairs and keep working. So from a productivity piece, I think it's going to be one of those places where we're going to keep seeing that growth.
Manuel?
Excellent. First of all, that's a great question, Rob. Productivity as a service. That's something we would like to get to. And what does that mean for us? I'm going to take the lens of two different groups. One, the individual, and two, a group of people. So when we talk about productivity as a service, what does that mean? As an individual, what do I expect from the space that I'm operating in that would allow me to be more productive? Is it going to be the ambient environment in terms of the air quality, in terms of the light setting, in terms of the amount of particulate matter I have in the air because I may have some allergic reactions to different type of content that is there? Okay, is it the noise levels? Is it the interaction with the environment? When I talk about environment, I'm talking about interaction with sound, interaction with sight, interaction with the trees and the plants around me. What do I need that is going to allow me to be more productive? And in that space, how do I allow you to choose the range of services and optimize the setting of the services that you need? So productivity is truly a service that you pick and choose based on the mood or the environment or the type of task you'd like to get done. Shifting from the individual and going to the group, it's about saying there are different forms of collaboration, right? You've got learning styles of collaboration, you've got brainstorming, you've got lecturing, you've got discussions. How is the space going to change? So we all have been used to spaces which are rigid. I walk into an NPR, and NPR is an NPR, right? I can't use it for anything else, a multi-purpose room. Okay, if I walk into a conference room is a conference room. I have a table, I have seats, I have phones. How am I going to allow that group of people who all of a sudden come and say, hey, we need to have an ad hoc brainstorming session, and the optimum configuration for a brainstorming session is not tables in a row, but tables facing each other. And in between that, we're going to have all the other AV tools that come inside. How is space going to dynamically adapt to the needs of the group of users in that space? That is where we then start talking about productivity as a service, allowing the occupants to choose the type of productivity they would like to get and reconfigure the space to match the needs and requirements that they have. So do I think productivity as a service? Yes, absolutely. And I think that's where space is headed today.
Excellent. Steve, what's your thoughts on this?
That's some heavy stuff there. Well, look, to be honest, when we first went on this journey, this was not about an employee experience. It wasn't about the employee. It was about efficiency. It was about saving money. It was about reducing wrench time. It was about equipment life cycle extensions, proactive maintenance and things like that. Because the folks above my pay scale didn't understand what all that was, and all they wanted to know was that the bottom line was going to change. But since we've been on this journey, we've realized that it has morphed in a different direction. It has become more about the employee experience, putting the controls in the hands of the employee. We've been in the middle of a few proof of concepts that now give our folks the ability to be able to order food online and reach out for automobiles online and for directing their mail services through their apps on their phones. Look, in some cases, it's a little bit of a placebo to make them feel like they're in control. The last thing you want to do is give every employee in your building control of your air conditioning systems. But if you can control and throttle down a damper over their desk to give them a little bit of cool air, and to make them feel like they have some control, it changes the entire overall experience. I'm a little skeptical about measuring productivity. If you can't count it, I don't know how you measure it really. And I think we're all struggling with, how do you get a return on that type of an investment? But overall, I think the overall comfort and the feel and the experience of being in an office space that feels more like home, I think is really invaluable. We used to say we had a mission statement at HBO when I was back there. It was that our job in real estate was to put the home in home box office, make people feel like they're in the house, and worry about making the next Sopranos, and don't worry about how hot it is and how cold it is and where your food is and where your travel is and so forth. So I think we kind of live by that guiding principle today.
That's really this idea, I would say, and I'll just categorize this, is the laying out the vision to what the future looks like, so that you can go get not only the employees buy-in, but all the teams around that need to provide that whole experience, from the design to IT to the construction world to how you run the facility. Getting buy-in on that vision is pretty important. Yet it's a vision. It doesn't exist today. Like when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, was it back in 2008, 2007? People said there is no way we're going to use our finger to run our lives, right? And now that's just the way we think about things. I use that iPhone example just because most folks are familiar with that. So in that context, I'll start with you, Steve, and work our way other way down the panel. How important is it to sell the vision or the vision that you had 5, 6, 7 years ago on your project? On a scale, I'll just say this, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, how important it is to get the buy-in on that vision? And then we'll go down the panel here.
Well, it's extremely important. I'll say it's a 10 if that's a number that we're looking for. I think the real challenge is to be able to convince folks that have no idea what we're doing that this is an invaluable proposition here that we have to do it in order to be responsible custodians of our properties. I think it's pretty straightforward like that.
And as far as just to work in with the context of another question from Emmanuel's standpoint, do you see, I don't want to say specifically Microsoft, but organizations in general, as far as getting the buy-in of the groups, is that something that has to be internalized, not only internalized, but completely done internally? Or is that something that's a mixture of internal and external service providers as you see it, or does it really matter that much?
The way I would say it, Rob, I think it has to be an ecosystem, because ultimately buildings and the technology that go into buildings are so vast and so diverse, right? You're talking all the way from access management systems to lighting systems to building automation systems or controllers. In addition to controllers, even something as simple and basic as structured cabling. If we have to deliver the vision of a smart building, one, the ecosystem should be able to respond to the needs and requirements the building has, to cater for those requirements with the infrastructure that is needed. Two, the occupants of that building should be able to accept and believe that the services you are going to provide are actually feasible, and those services will benefit them. And finally, Steve and Byron both touched on it really nicely is you can only make a building smart and connected if the underlying assets supporting those services are smart, connected, stable, and sustainable. I can't have an asset whose lifetime goes down because I'm consuming data from it all the time. I can't have an asset that is more prone to failure because of the amount of use that's going to happen as an outcome of the service we are creating. So merging the realities of what it takes to keep the lights on, to ensure the assets in that building are functioning at optimum capacity, driving cost savings and driving efficiency, and using data from those assets to be able to provide the services that occupants need, is what it's going to be all about. And that's where, we strongly believe the merger of IT and OT needs to come together to make a building smart, connected, and the people within it productive.
Thank you. And then Byron, you said you guys manage about 14 million square feet. Is that
Correct?
Is that right? As it relates to what is a smart building, and as we talk about all these different technologies, how do you find yourself communicating inside your organization? Back to this internal concept. Is it a push? Is it a pull? Is it a combination? And how does that happen?
That's a great question. And for us, it was a partnership, right? From the beginning, we knew it had to be a partnership. It had to be somebody from IT on our side, somebody from physical security, somebody for facilities management, and then a high-level executive that had to buy in, right? Because IT likes to dictate, right? As IT professionals, we like to say, you can't do this, but we got to flip the script and say, let's see how we can do it together. Let's figure out the axes, right? In IT, we always say security is always at the top, but in OT, it's always axes and getting to your systems. So we had to find a balance where I had to recommend a system. Our facility manager team would say, yes, that works, that doesn't work, or these are the limitations. And having that conversation, it's imperative. If you don't have a conversation, we created an internal team so that we all know what's going on, because then you can figure out if anybody else has other projects. If sustainability has a project that affects facilities management, that's going to affect security, and they all carry a different budget for it, and they're all doing different things, well, now you can centralize all those pieces into one location, and you can make that project faster, more efficient, potentially even cheaper. So you have to be able to do that. And then economy scales, right? Because we are across 4 different regions, and the 4 different regions might want different things, not realizing that they're all talking about the same exact product, the same exact solution, deployment. And then you can say, well, vendor, you gave me 4 different options, 4 different quotes. Give me one as a portfolio, right? Instead of saying I have 2 million square feet that you're going to put it in, we're going to put it in 14 million square feet. And how does that lower my cost? So you have to be able to have a conversation.
Hey, Rob,
Yeah.
I'll just add, just going to add another perspective here. When we first started out down this journey, it was really about, as I mentioned, saving money. It became much more of a challenge. You have to have a champion when this thing began. We had to have somebody who was bold enough to lean in and say, this is something we must do. Now that time has passed and we're probably 8 to 10 years on the road to this, it's much easier now for me to be able to mobilize teams across the portfolio. We're looking at it in Atlanta, we're looking at it in Burbank, we're looking at it internationally to create this interconnected portfolio of buildings. But someone's got to start it, right? There has to be a catalyst in your organization that believes in it, that perhaps is part of these types of organizations like Realcomm or IBcon or Cortec and all those areas, to really learn what it's about and bring it home and be that champion. It's not an easy task to go it alone initially, but I think once you get the wheels rolling, you get other champions to get on board, and they carry the torch because it's the right thing to do. It isn't about whether or not the technology works. It works. It's out there. It's about bringing it all together and convincing the powers that be that it would be irresponsible to not do it this way.
So as it relates to the technology working, I'm going to talk a little bit of, now we're going to move topics to a little bit of what sometimes becomes the elephant in the room. The technology works. And Byron, you talked a little bit about how the IT side of the house and the facility side of the house, they got to work together and they share budgets and so forth. How do you address this thing around cybersecurity? Because it can, we've had some thousands of buildings that have paused for years on that topic. I'll start with Byron and we'll move back the other direction.
I think we have to make sure that people understand that it's a cultural corporate thing, right? It's not the corporate networks over there. Don't touch my building network. No, they're all corporate networks. We're all Kilroy. We're all, the brand. If something happens to the buildings, the brand gets affected, right? If something happens to a site that goes down, a chiller goes down, ADU goes down, something happens, the building itself is affected, and thus the rest of us as employees. So talking to them, letting them know that we're not trying to mess them up. We're not trying to take over their jobs. We're trying to add to it. We're trying to create additional pieces and resources for them to be able to take a look. We had engineers who would get a proposal from a vendor that was going end of life, maybe at the end of that year, right? That doesn't work. What we have to say is, look, next year you have to do this again, and maybe the next year after that, because the vendor knows that you're not going to go back and check. But if you give that to me or one of our resources, we can tell you, look at this piece, look at the server, look at the OS on this device. What is the long-term goal as part of your cybersecurity strategy that we're doing together? And that's kind of where it worked for us.
Yeah, so from our perspective, cybersecurity is paramount. There is no negotiation when it comes to security of assets and devices coming in. And the way we started looking at it is, one, you have security of the device. How do you secure the device which is capturing the data that you need? Because ultimately, if the device is capturing wrong data, non-calibrated data, or fraud data, it could lead to wrong type of experiences happening. Then we start talking about network security. And I think to Byron's point, it's not different networks, right? Everything is owned by you to cater that experience for you. So how do you take care of security of the network, especially with different types of devices coming in? So today, when we look at a building, you have anywhere from 10 to 15,000 devices that go into a building, capturing that data, offering the services that you would like to have. So with all these devices coming in, how do you secure the device? How do you secure the data transmission from the device? And how do you secure the network that these devices are on? Now, the third layer that I think, which is also becoming critically important, is security of the data. How do you ensure that the data that you are capturing is not going to be misused and used for services other than what you advertise your services to be? How do you ensure the ethics and privacy of that data is going to be taken care of? Bringing in all this together ultimately is going to lead to the most important factor, which is successful for the adoption of a smart building, which is trust. If I trust the building and the environment that I'm going to work in, because I know the devices are secure, the networks are secure, and the data is being processed and handled in the right way, I will then start consuming the experiences that I would like to have. This all together is paramount importance within a building.
So trusting that data is paramount. Is trusting, I will call them operational technology systems like an HVAC system or a lighting system. Do you go about the same protocols to trust that as you would go about trusting an enterprise IT server?
No, it's very simple. You walk in, you flip the switch on, the light turns on, right? The light working shows you that it's on, right? You're trusting that the light is sufficient for you to work with. Now, let's assume you want to orchestrate your flow across the building. Use a navigation system, use an access management system, and use a people finding system within that space. How do you trust that the data which shows you are moving around the campus, searching for people, trying to achieve the goal that you want to achieve is not going to be misused or misconstrued? Okay, it's very different from flipping a switch and turning the light on. And that's where the trust comes in to say that this service is going to be used as a way to empower me to meet my objectives much better. And that trust will only come if I know that the service is designed for the specific need of empowering me, not for anything else.
Just as a comment, Emmanuel, when the audience said your cup is all time, just so you know that. Steve.
Yeah.
I saw you shaking your head around this trust and cybersecurity.
I like my cyber experience, which started a long time ago, and we made some bad assumptions early on that the IT guys are going to figure this stuff out when we first got out of the gate in 2008. But it wasn't. It took a little while for us to realize that their specialty was really business type systems, and it really wasn't about prop tech systems to protect the industrial envelope of brick and mortar. I remember approaching our CISO back in late 2000, maybe 10 or 12, And I said, we're going to do this thing called a smart building. And his response was, well, we know BMS. And I'm like, no, not quite BMS. This is BMS on steroids. This is a whole different monster. And then they went on a whole different journey to educate their teams as to what it is, to provide cybersecurity. So it really was a lesson learned for us. We should have engaged them day one from the very beginning. This merging between technology and geeks is really becoming one happy place today. I think it also lends itself for opportunity for those wrench turners to be able to move to the other side of the fence. I should say it's the wrench turners and the geeks are kind of finding that middle ground, and the opportunities prevail. We have several engineers that have really started to fly as specialists in this smart building space. But from a cyber perspective, our teams are very tight now. They understand all the aspects, all the penetration, all the testing. We have clear direction to our service providers that want to join our system. This is where you plug in, leave all your graphics home, leave all your wires home. The only thing I'll say, and it was a comment earlier about sensors and infrastructure and things like that. We should really take a close look at where the market is today, because it's less about wires today. It's becoming far more affordable. It's about wireless sensor technology all over the place. And as long as we can protect that from a cyber perspective, I think the cost to build these spaces is going to come down significantly over time.
So I'm going to switch tacks a little bit here and talk about one of the I'll call the holy grails of intelligent buildings, and that is the smartphone app. Right? We're gonna have this app, and you're gonna click on it, and it's gonna do everything that the occupant needs to do. A double question here, and we'll start with you, Steve, and work our way back. Is do you think the smartphone app is something that's achievable? And if so, is this more of a business-driven question, or is this more of a technology limited question?
I think it's more on the technology side. Lots of players out there in this space. I mean, what we're involved in now, and I'll call it out. We've been doing a proof of concept with Comfy for a while now. They were originally an organization that really controlled your HVAC dampers and so forth. Real building engineers were always afraid that they were controlling our systems, and that's not really what was going on. And they've morphed as an organization as well, and embraced being able to hook on other services to the front face of this particular app. I think, again, because it's there and it works and they can make it pretty and they can make it very friendly, it's more about educating your own folks to be able to take advantage of this great tool and this great technology over there. That's available. To some, the novelty wears off after a while and just kind of flattens out, and then you question whether the investment was appropriate or not. But I guess it depends upon where you are in the life cycle of your organization, and whether you have elders or youngers and so forth that are coming through the organization that are embracing the world of apps, or the world of technology compared to the older school like me, I guess.
So are you just for clarity, are you piloting an app today, or do you have, or I guess with the delay of the pandemic?
Well, look, I'm gonna be straight up. We didn't talk about COVID yet, but COVID punched us all in the throat as we were trying to make progress here. So we got set back the last several months, but we are still in the midst of a proof of concept with Comfy, and hope we can roll that out on a grander scale, particularly at Hudson Yards and perhaps at some of our other facilities around the globe. And it doesn't mean we're not open to discuss others, but we've been partnering with them for over a year now, and they kind of understand the inner workings of how we operate and the key touch points on those apps that would be of interest to our people.
Emmanuel.
So I'm going to answer that from the perspective of saying, is it possible today with technology? Yes, right? Absolutely, there is no doubt. The challenge has always been about unifying the data from these disparate systems, bringing them together, and exposing the service that the app can consume. And the app can consume, and people could interact with it. Now, where I'm going to say it a little differently is, the success of the experience is about how the experience is going to be consumed by the user or the occupant of that space. Now, there are certain experiences that are best suited for a phone. There are certain experiences that are not best suited for the phone. And that's where we then start talking about what is the best point of origination for consuming that service. Is that going to be a phone? Is that going to be a kiosk? Is that going to be a screen on the wall? Is that going to be something to do with augmented reality? Because the choice of service origination for consumption is what is going to dictate the successful adoption of that service. So it starts moving away from, should the app be the only way? Probably not, depending upon different demographics of people that go through that space and how they would like to consume that service. Different forms of engagement should be made available to you. And the classical example that I see is, if you are driving around in a garage, you don't want the guy or girl to take out the phone and punch in navigation coordinates and start looking at the phone rather than looking on the road or looking to what's happening in front of them. And that's where the combination of using integrated signage in that space, allowing for better safety, starts to fit in. So yes, it is completely feasible. People are headed to it, but I think the ultimate direction is people are now going to choose the optimum mode of engagement for the service depending upon the space that they are in.
Byron?
Yeah, and for us, I think it's a two-way answer, right? Because we have tenants who want to have applications that are tied into our base buildings. So we have to work with those tenants. It's interesting that Steve mentioned Comfy. We've had an issue with Comfy in the past. We now have a tenant who really loves Comfy and it has to be Comfy, and it said it has to be that. So we have to integrate it, right? So we have to figure out a way of how the tenant wants to use that application. But internally, for base building systems, access controls, being able to go through your building with just a phone and not have to pull out a key card or a fob, that's an application on your phone that you can provide as a service, right? So it's two different sets of customers, two different needs. They will be adopted differently, right? More people are probably going to adopt my access control application to get into the building than maybe the Comfy application, but it's services that we have to provide, and we have to go back and take a look at the security policy, right? Because if a tenant requests something and it's going to be involved with my building infrastructure, it has to be secure. So there's 1,000,001 applications out there, but you have to do your due diligence. And there's different areas and different avenues where they're being asked for. So you have to figure out what really is an important things. Where can you work with vendors that have a reputation that you can then say, deploy that portfolio wide or deploy it at a larger scale? But it's two different sets of questions for us, I think.
So we're getting tight on time, and I'm trying to get through all these questions. And what the next question here is, are we seeing the use of data and analytics and smart buildings and for better decision making, right? And we're talking about one thing as it relates to a building app, but I would say we call those things, different types of use cases, right? There's so many different ways in which you can talk about technology. I'll go out of order here. I'll go to Steve. And Steve, what's some examples that you're seeing?
I'm just going to say data in general. I just mentioned a building has over 200,000 data points all coming to a central brain. No human being can actually process that type of data into anything actionable, which is why we rely heavily. And I should say, let me add that data for the sake of data is useless, right? It needs to be converted into something that our people understand and can bring value. So we wrap all this information through fault detection diagnostic software that actually gives us something to chew on. It actually directs our teams and our engineers to go throttle down a damper or open a vent or do something, some action that the building has decided has to happen. It isn't an easy process, but we have to be able to turn this data into something that we can work with, because it is just overwhelming. Reports and reports and reports. What do we actually do with this information? You need third-party software. We've embraced SkySpark from the beginning. We also partner with Alberio, that's really helping us convert that information. And to your point, Rob, our entire ecosystem of smart buildings is based on business use cases, right? It isn't just this wild head of hair. We don't do things as we can do it. We do things because it meets our overall objective in terms of how we want to operate our overall buildings. But even within those confines, there's an enormous amount of information that continues to flow, and we need a way to channel it and make it productive. And that's how we do it through fault detection diagnostics.
60 seconds, Manuel and Byron here. What are your thought processes or how we talk about the technology and sell it inside your machines, if you will?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to agree with Steve completely. Data for the sake of data is useless. What does matter is, however, the types of data that we are capturing today is going to allow for better design of the space within a building and better design of the building itself. When you start talking about different types of spaces, what are the most common spaces people are spending time on? What are the most common spaces people are connecting with? What are the different types of rooms people would prefer? What are the different optimum navigation points or walkways people like to use? It's not about A or B. It's why do they like this? Is it because it's more easier to walk through? It is more lit up. Okay, it is more approachable to people. So, we believe that, ultimately data is going to dictate the creation of much more intelligent buildings that are intentionally designed to meet the needs of the people that those buildings are built for. And that's where we're headed. But taking too much of data and not making sense of it is going to lead to chaos, and bad design.
Chaos is bad. Byron, you're the final guy here. Give us some words of wisdom.
I think that both what Steve and Emmanuel said is correct. I mean, it's spot on. Data for the sense of data is just worthless. If you don't have the right people looking at it, then you're not going to do anything with it. You can give me 200 books, but if I don't have the time to read it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to get in here. You want to make sure that you analyze it and make sure that you structure it and make sure that you are able to use it for the correct decision making. And I think that's it for me. Steve and Emmanuel had great remarks on that.
Well, thank you, everybody. We're getting the hook here. This went by really fast. Thanks all of y'all for contributing to. Hopefully, for the audience, that was insightful. Again, thanks for everyone for joining us, and very energized by this conversation. Look forward to having more. Have a great day.